Hello again, my name is Ezra, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. The devs released an update today, or yesterday when I upload this video, because I'm going to upload this tomorrow because I'm trying to do a daily video every single day for this year. Maybe, at least until I get sick of it. But, I don't want to keep, churning out the same content endlessly, so this is something to break up the monotony. And also, this is very interesting. So, normally I wouldn't be doing this, but the devs for Dead by Daylight released an update. And it's actually very interesting, and I think very good. So I wanted to go over it and give my opinion on it, because I've seen a lot of people doing that, but also I think that these decisions have been both really interesting, but also really good. Other than, maybe Onryo. Hers is fine. It's not bad, but it's also not, good or interesting. Anyway, let's get into it. So they're talking about generators. I've already read all this, but I might as well read through it again. So people have been complaining about the 3-gen scenarios and how that's very unfun and it leads to really long matches. And I think that something that the Dead by Daylight community, I don't know, I want to say fails to understand, but maybe they do understand it. The devs kind of react to things a little slowly, and it does take time to recode these things, and the devs have said multiple times, the code for Dead by Daylight is a mess. If they change one little thing, it breaks 15 perks and makes nonsensical bugs, seeing the killer inside out, and just, your camera going a mile away. People just shooting off into space for no reason, and character models just floating upside down. There's a lot of nonsense that's happened to this game over the years. So they take their updates very seriously now, and they do it a lot slower. So I think that this stuff is more in response to things around the time of Skull Merchant coming out. It was just a couple months ago that they fixed Made for this. And, people have been complaining about Ultimate Weapon, and they said they were going to fix Ultimate Weapon, but that's not in this patch, so it's going to be a bit before that gets fixed. But here, they're dealing with 3-gens, which was a big problem with Skull Merchant, and is kind of still a problem now. And a lot of people were worried that the way that they fixed 3-gens would just make survivors busted. That it was just going to, add another generator, which just ruins things for the killer, or just, makes generators so much easier to do that holding a 3-gen would be literally impossible. Which just means that in a general game, where they're not 3-genning, the game is impossible, because the gens would just get done, Which is not okay. But what they did was actually really cool. So each generator can only suffer from 8 regression events. So if the killer kicks the generator, or some perk like Surge blows it up, something like that. And this, at first glance, sounds like a terrible thing, but when you think about it, if I'm playing as killer, in a lot of my games, I barely even kick the same gen twice. There have been a couple of situations where I will hook somebody, pop goes the weasel, at the last second as I down somebody else, then I pick that person up and hook them, and somebody else will run up and tap the gen, and then I get to pop goes the weasel that gen a second time immediately. And then now that that's gen's, fully regressed, they'll end up working on that later in the game, and I might kick it 2 or 3 more times. That's still only 5 times over the course of a whole game of Dead by Daylight. 8 kicks for a single gen is actually a lot. That'll almost never come up in a normal game. But, in a 3-gen situation, if you're refusing to chase people, or you're refusing to play normally, and you just keep kicking the gens to keep them regressing, this is really good. This is very helpful. And anytime the killer or their perks removes at least 2.5% of the generator's progress in an instant. So I wonder if this is going to be you kick it, and that's 2.5%, and then if you had the perk overcharge, if the survivor misses their skill check, does that count as a second? Stuff like that might cause problems, but it is what it is. And then an indicator will show the killer if a generator can no longer be damaged. And in the overwhelming majority of the games, this will not come into play. And it won't. This just won't happen. But yeah, if they're refusing to chase survivors, eventually it'll come to a point where they can't damage the gen, which will bring an end to excessively long matches. It'll still be... They can still 3-gen, and it'll still be rough for the survivors, but they can do the generators, and there's nothing that the killer can do to prevent the generator from gaining progress, at least, which is very helpful. And at the same time, we want to address the point of frustration for the killers as well. Survivors tapping the gen to stop it from regressing. So now, they're negating that, which is very interesting. So kicking a gen is now up to 5% instead of 2.5, which is very nice, very useful. And at least 5% of the generator's total charges must be repaired to stop regressing. Otherwise, it will just begin regressing again when the survivor stops repairing. So this right here could end up causing some problems. Because if you have to do 5%, that's not a lot. That's a very, very small amount. But depending on the killer, depending on the power, what is 5%? Is it still 80 seconds to finish a gen right now? So a gen takes 90 seconds, so 5% is only 4.5 seconds of time that the survivor has to be on the gen, which is honestly not that long. Yeah, that's actually plenty of time. I was going to say, this is going to still maybe cause problems with 3-genning, because you can't tap the gen to stop it regressing. If the killer comes back fast enough, it'll just start regressing again. But 4.5 seconds isn't enough time for a killer to hold a solid 3-gen, as long as the survivors are actually like playing well. So I think this is all just a really good change. It prevents gen tapping, and it'll help 3-gens. It's not going to completely remove them from the game, but it makes them so much, like, ineffective. Because, like, certain killers could hold 3-gens, and it's a guaranteed win, no matter how long that win takes. Now, there's a point. There's no longer a no matter how long it takes. There will be a limit. The survivors will eventually get out. And then they're doing the FOV slider thing, so Shadowborn and Monitor, you just can permanently have that now, which is pretty nice. And then the Onryo. So they changed it so anytime that you teleport, everyone on the map gets a little bit of condemned, instead of just if you're within 16 meters. So I just recorded a video yesterday that I will probably post Friday of how current Onryo is a little overpowered. I tried to do a challenge of killing all the survivors without getting a single hook, and it was so shockingly easy. I did it again without perks or add-ons. Just rolled the survivors. It's so unfair. And especially since you kill a survivor so early into the match, they never go down. They get to go down once. So they get one chase, and that is it. They're dead. Once they become condemned, that's it. They don't get to play the game anymore. And I hate things that remove a survivor from the game super early and they just don't get to play. That's why I don't like tunneling. But, like, that's what her power lets her do. And I still don't like that. Her power still does that. But they basically reverted her back to old Onryo, but now she doesn't have a cooldown on teleports. So she can actually use her power freely, which was the big problem originally. And condemning people was also completely worthless, because survivors didn't even have to grab tapes and take care of them. They just never become condemned, because you have to teleport within 16 meters of them, which is a little rough. But now, it's, if she teleports, any survivors within 16 meters of power TV will receive a stack of condemned. So it's any power TV, which is pretty great, I think. It'll still allow it to be useful, but not busted, I hope. And she can't, like, continuously force it, because as I say in the video that I made yesterday, that'll come out on Friday, as long as she's teleporting, she depowers the TVs, and you can't get a tape from a powerless TV, but you'll still get condemned no matter where on the map you are. But this, it's only if you're near a power TV that you'll receive a stack of condemned. So if you're nearest power TV, you could also just grab VCR, like, then you just don't have to worry about it. You can just turn the TV off, and there's actual value in that. And then holding the tapes no longer protects you from getting condemned, and they're no longer destroyed or condemn you when you get hit, and you have to deposit in the furthest TV. So it does force you to actually waste time, so it does put pressure on the survivors to have to, like, actually remove the curse. And if she hooks somebody, it actually locks that curse in, so they can't cleanse those stacks anymore. I don't know how good this version of her is going to be, but it's at least going to be a happy middle ground, I think. It's not going to let you just ignore playing the game and just spam teleport to try and condemn everybody now, but it also isn't just going to be useless. I'm curious as to how good it'll actually be, but as long as it's very similar to Pig, forcing you to move around the map to make sure that you don't just die. So hopefully it works. And then the Hillbilly finally got his big change. Everybody's basically been waiting for this since they changed him originally. Getting Overheated no longer exists. Now there's Overdrive. Not that Overheat mattered all that much. In all the games that I've played of him, I've never once had him come close to overheating. But now he has Overdrive, so it's exactly the same, but if his heat meter fills, instead of losing his chainsaw and being a powerless killer, he can continue to use it, except he gets a buff for 20 seconds, which 20 seconds is nothing. But he charges his saw faster, his movement speed increases by, like, double, isn't that? Doesn't he move, like, 7 meters per second already? That's actually a pretty massive speed increase. But, if the bar is the same as it was for Overheat, again, I never got the chainsaw to Overheat, which means you'll probably have to work to get into Overdrive. But I'm curious if this is actually useful. And then they also buffed his chainsaw movement speed by 10%, which is great. And they reduced the size of his collision detection so that he doesn't just stun himself every single time he tries to move. Which, great. Very nice. I don't think that this makes Hillbilly all that much better. Hillbilly is always, like, since Oni came out, Hillbilly has just been a worse version of the Oni, except he has his power all the time, versus Oni, who has his power for a limited time. The Oni just moves just as fast, has way more control, doesn't stun himself if he bumps into objects. Like, he's just kind of better. It just takes some time to charge up. And this, I'm curious as to how this will come into play. The massive, like, movement speed changes. And depending on, like, how much his collisions changed, and, like, if he's actually better at maneuverability, it'll be interesting to see for sure. Hopefully we'll see some Hillbillies again, because I have not seen a single Hillbilly in all the time since I've started playing again. They adjusted a bunch of the Blight's add-ons. I don't really have much to say about this, because I don't really play Blight, and I also barely ever see Blight. It's just, his add-ons are fine. They're just, like, a little bit better, a little bit worse. And then he does have this nonsense. He has this iridescent Blight tag, and now its ability is enables rush to be performed without spending tokens, and the bonuses are capped after 3 rushes. But what this really means is you can just Blight forever. You just have a 20-second cooldown after you land a hit. So that's kind of wild. Like, he can just rush endlessly, which will be very powerful for map pressure and in, like, certain chases around certain tiles, just being able to ricochet as many times as he wants. But other than that, I don't care all that much about Blight, and most of this is just basic, ordinary things. Just nerfing his strong add-ons and buffing his useless add-ons. Now here's the big thing. This is the thing that I'm really here for. Save the best for last. I've seen a lot of people hard complaining about this nerf, but everybody was expecting it, And this is basically exactly what I was expecting. I'm glad that they didn't make it completely worthless, because they did that with Dead Hard, Decisive Strike. And yeah, Dead Hard and Decisive Strike needed to get nerfed. They were by far way too strong. Best, like, perks in the whole game, Killer or Survivor. But now they're almost entirely useless. Just worthless perks, basically. I mean, Dead Hard can be useful if you can get it off, but it's really hard to use. And it's super limited. But Save the Best for Last, they actually just nerfed it, and I think it's completely fair, but a lot of people have been complaining about it. And it's mostly, like, each token now grants 4% decreased cooldown instead of 5%, which I wasn't expecting them. I thought that they might do this. Making it only 4% instead of 5% is actually fine. I was worried that they might reduce it even more and just make it useless. But this is fine. And then 2 tokens are lost when the Obsession loses a health state by any means instead of basic attacks. So this here is the big, like, controversial statement. So, in my opinion, Save the Best for Last right now, as it is in-game, because these are just what's going to happen, this isn't in the game yet. As of my opinion currently, I think Save the Best for Last is the best killer perk. Currently. It depends on which killer you're playing, obviously, but, like, it's hands down the best perk on Demogorgon. It's really good on Pig, it's really good on a lot of M2 killers, like even Hillbilly and Leatherface, the Nemesis especially. Like, it's really good for a lot of killers. And even just regular M1 killers, you just ignore the Obsession and never hit the Obsession, and you're just incredibly powerful. It's an incredibly powerful perk. And that still exists. That's still there for the M1 killers who just want to not touch the Obsession, which is a little annoying. It sucks if, like, everybody just kind of gets tunneled down because they won't touch the Obsession. But that's just the game. There's not a whole lot that they could do for that, other than having the Obsession swap every time that they hook somebody, which I saw a lot of people suggesting that, and I kind of agree that might change it, but that makes Save the Best for Last do a lot. And then, like, the decreasing the cooldown, that is what it is. The bigger problem that I have with this, and I've seen a few people complaining about this, is that it loses a health state by any means. So if this was just basic attacks and special attacks, like the text reading for Hex the Third Steel, hitting a survivor with a basic attack or a special attack while the Hex is active applies the blindness status effect. See? That wording makes it very different. But their wording is when the Obsession loses a health state by any means, which a lot of people are quite worried about. And I kind of understand it. So, say you're the Obsession, and you're going up against a trapper. You intentionally step in a trap, and your friend bails you out because they were waiting right there. You lost a health state. Does the killer lose 2 tokens of Save the Best for Last? Huh? Does he? You have Bloody Coil as Trapper. The Obsession just breaks a trap and loses a health state. You lose 2 tokens. You get hit by a zombie while running around on the map where the Nemesis is chasing some other random person and you lose a health state. Does the killer just suddenly lose 2 tokens? Like, how does this work? Like, going up against the Plague, using plot twist and deciding to down yourself, and then have somebody heal you up and you pick yourself back up, or you have somebody else pick you back up so that you don't have to waste plot twist and then you just down yourself again? 2 tokens gone? Yes? No? What are the thoughts on that? So that is a little bit controversial, and I do agree that's kind of bullshit. It should not influence, like, Trapper's Traps. The Artist's Birds totally makes sense. I saw somebody complaining, like, the Artist's Birds. No, that's a special attack. That should count. it should count all special attacks. The Pig's Dash, the Nurse's Blink, not that that really matters. Although the Nurse's Blink won't trigger gaining a stack with a basic attack anyway. But yeah, like, it's... killers can circumvent it by using their special attack. That shouldn't be a thing. Like, it should just be special attacks, not any way that they lose a health state. There's also, like, For the People. If they give up a health state with For the People, are they suddenly just screwing the killer over passively? Like, stuff like that. That shouldn't be a thing. It should just be similar to the third seal text. Has to be a proper down, you know? Has to be an attack. Grim Embrace. So, I recently got this in a random perk wheel, and I actually ran up against a killer that was using it, and this is actually a really cool perk. Like, it was actually very interesting. I've never seen anyone play it until I rolled it randomly and then ran into somebody running it the very same day. But this is the new version. So instead of having it activate once after you hook every survivor one time, since that's a little inconsistent and difficult to activate, so you have one survivor that just hides all game, which happens in my random perk wheel video, and it kind of led to me losing that match even. But, did I lose that match? Yeah, I did. Technically, I got 2 kills, but that's a draw, I guess, not a loss, but I consider it a loss. The first time that a survivor is hooked, all generators are blocked for 12 seconds once the killer moves at least 16 meters away from the hook. So this will always ensure that the killer is able to get some value. 12 seconds is not a long time, but being able to force everyone off of gens for any amount of time, and then having, like, barbecue so that you can go and start a chase with them, that could be really strong, gotta be honest. And that means that you can, like, safely run to one gen and chase people away from it, and then maybe even have time to go to another gen, unless the survivors just stand around. 12 seconds isn't all that long a time, but this is every time that a survivor gets hooked. I do like the fact that it is the first time, so it forces you to go around and, like, chase everybody. You can't just tunnel one person down, which is quite helpful. But, this could pair pretty nastily with Scourge Hook Pain Res, and it might just be the new meta perk, honestly. This might just appear on everybody. It's only 12 seconds, so it might not be that bad. We're gonna have to see once this comes to pass. Quick Gambit. They reduced the repair speed bonus, but increased the range to 36 meters. I think this is good. This perk was fairly useless. I've kind of wanted to make a perk build around it, or at least using it. The 24 meters is such a short range that it's impossible to be near a gen and be looping, unless you're on, like, the farm and you have, like, a steady loop that you can run near a gen. But, like, you're not going to be close enough to the gen for a long enough amount of time. This is still terror radius worthy, but it's not so close that the killer is just going to be like, I can clearly see you working on this gen, I'm just going to go after you. I don't think this will end up meta, but it could. But I definitely want to do a fun build on Survivor with it. I definitely want to make a build with it. Ruin, they turned it back so it doesn't disable the second that you kill somebody. That's both good and bad. I think it's purely an upside from a gameplay perspective, because the perk's already disabled by cleansing it. They already nerfed the perk into the ground, because now it just regresses all gens when they're not being worked on, when originally it was, you know, the best killer perk in the game, and then it got turned down to just gens regress at 200% speed when they're regressing, and you don't have to kick them, and now it's just you don't have to kick them. And then it was just, you kill a single person, oh, your perk's gone, even if the survivors never cleansed the totem. A little annoying, but this did technically counter tunneling a little bit, because it meant that tunneling removed one of your perks if they didn't already cleanse the totem. Which, I mean, that doesn't affect me, and it doesn't affect a lot of killers, but anybody that does tunnel and chose to use this perk was getting punished for it. Or now people that tunnel and avoided this perk can now just go back to using it, which I don't think that's a valid thing to balance the game around, but they do need to find some better way to punish tunneling a little bit, or at least dissuade it. Shadowborn, if you get blinded, you gain a 10% haste effect for 10 seconds. This doesn't do all that much, but it helps you recover a little bit if you manage to get stun blind while carrying a survivor, and it's very helpful if survivors decide to blind you while you're vaulting a window or breaking a pallet. Because, like I show in all my videos, if you ever get blinded, you can hear the footsteps. If you listen real close, the 10% haste effect will let you get a nice free hit. You already kind of get a free hit if they do it while you're breaking the pallet. Now you might be able to get it off of the stun if they blind you while you're getting stunned and then break the pallet. This might actually be really useful. And you could do a meme build of Shadowborn and Lightborn where you get haste and True Sight. The only problem is that's completely useless if they don't have a flashlight. Mountain Abuse, thankfully unchanged. The FOV thing, yeah, they put it on the slider, so technically they nerfed this perk, but that doesn't matter. The entire point of Honor and Abuse is the 8-meter tear radius thing, which is a huge deal on so many killers. I just love this perk. It's maybe my favorite perk in the game. Like, just for niche, interesting playstyles. Because, like, on Legion, making him shorter so that you can get closer because he's just an M1 killer, but then once you're in the chase, it improves his tear radius, makes it big so that he can actually use his power more effectively. Little things like that. Like, it's a fun perk for what it does. They updated Ormond. I don't care all that much about this. And then, our first limited time modifier, Dead by Daylight Lights Out, will be available to play in the coming months. I don't know what this, I'm assuming this is a new game mode. I don't actually know what this will do. Is it just going to be Dead by Daylight, but, like, way darker? Or is it just going to be, like, permanent Nightfall mode of, you know, the Dredge, where you can't see more than, like, 16 meters from you? I bet it's just going to be Nightfall, but could be fun. But yeah, I think that this is, all in all, like, a pure positive update. Like, every single change that they made, I think is golden. If this loses a health state by any means actually does apply to anything, that might be a problem. But if it's just basic attacks and special attacks, that's fine. That is, in a perfect world, it would just be this and no slowdown. And it's just special attacks and basic attacks. I've seen some people complaining that, like, this, Save the Best for Last in general kind of encourages tunneling, because you get the free hit by going back to the hook. You get to hit the person that's unhooking. You get to hit the person that got unhooked, even though they get their endurance effect. You still got the hit, so you get a free stack. And even I've done that. Like, I've gone after the person that got unhooked just to get the Save the Best for Last stack. I don't tunnel them down, but I do chase after them just to get that free hit for the sake of the stack. And this isn't fixing that, but how are you going to fix that? Unless you change it to anytime you hook somebody, they become the obsession, which then actually, if they made this like 3% or 3.5%, I could see them doing that. You hook the person, and when you hook them, they become the obsession, because then anybody else that you chase after won't be the obsession. So it's not a matter of you avoiding the obsession, because the obsession is always the last person hooked, so you'll always be avoiding tunneling. I think that would actually be good. They give this a little bit more slowdown, and the person that you hook becomes the obsession. That might be a good idea. Just for the people that are upset that Save the Best for Last encourages tunneling a little bit. But again, anybody that is encouraged to tunnel probably would have tunneled anyway, I think. This makes tunneling a little overpowered because of how quickly you get your attack back, but I'm glad that it's not... I'm glad that this isn't as big of a nerf as it could have been. Like, I think this is totally reasonable. Unless this is any hell state by any means. If it's just basic and special attacks, that's okay. But again, it would be really unfortunate if this meant traps, everything, zombies, stuff like that. That would be a little annoying. Stuff that the survivor can intentionally do themselves, not stuff where the killer can avoid the obsession. But, anyway, they could also just deactivate this if the obsession dies. No, that wouldn't help. Because then people just ignore the obsession again. Oh well, who knows? This is difficult. It's very difficult to balance a perk like this and deal with the idea of tunneling other survivors and ignoring the obsession, or, like, tunneling down the obsession. It's really difficult to consider balancing a perk like this when it comes to, like, avoiding the obsession and just tunneling all the regular survivors and just playing around the obsession to where it's just an incredibly powerful perk as long as you're fighting 3 of the 4 players and you just ignore the 4th player completely, which means the other 3 just die faster because you're, like, semi-tunneling. Even if you don't tunnel, you're just splitting the hooks 3 ways instead of 4 ways, which is, like, barely the opposite of... It's like the inverse of tunneling. Which is like the inverse of tunneling. You're just chasing 3 people instead of 4. Or chasing 3 people instead of 1. But it can still end games a lot faster because of how powerful Save the Best for Last is. But now, maybe with this cooldown, it won't be too oppressive. But yeah, that's my opinion on the next update that's coming out. Whenever that ends up getting released. It's going on to the PTB soon, and then... I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think that they're all mostly positive changes. I think it'll all be good. But with that, I will leave this here. And thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Bye!